Welcome back, faithful listeners. It's another episode of Brew and Ink. We are here with a special guest tonight, very good friend of ours, Nick Stone is here with us.
You called me special.
Yeah, you're special. You are special.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, she came all the way from whichever city she's been traveling from.
That was nice.
Right.
But yeah, we're happy to have her tonight, and we're going to ask some questions, hard-hitting questions.
Gonna drill right down.
Yeah.
Just core
Grill her.
Bring it.
So, Nick, tell us a little about yourself. You're a writer, I guess, one of those things?
Yeah, it's one of those like nebulous concepts. That, what it really is a writer.
Right.
I am a novelist, and I have put on a new hat recently that I am unfortunately not allowed to talk about, but of course I'm a jerk and I'm going to put it out there and tease you anyway.
Mystery project.
But it is also writing involved. And I write young adult fiction. I just stepped into middle grade fiction.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be fun. And hoping to jump up into like the grown people stuff eventually. Though I hear it's kind of boring.
You say grown-ups are not as fun.
Grown-ups are whack, but it's okay.
Totally.
They buy books,
so
it works.
They have the money to buy books.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Thank you, grown-ups.
Appreciate you guys.
Yes.
And we've each kind of thought of a few questions to ask you.
Wait a minute. Before we talk about that, why are you traveling so much? Because you're a writer that actually...
And published.
Yeah. Published.
Yeah.
Which is different from anybody else at this table.
Well, it's wild, right? So, like, what I have learned over the past year, because my debut novel came out in October last year, so it hasn't even been a year yet, but the biggest takeaway is, like, there's a massive difference between being a writer and being an author.
Yeah.
The writing part is super solitary. You keep getting your Starbucks, which is where I write. I write in Starbucks. Yeah, like I'm sitting cooling it in my Starbucks, got my headphones on, jamming out at the bar. But the author part is where like you have to like talk to people and like go places.
Do proposals and make
people
sure
want to like
up to date.
People like want you to write your name on stuff. Like it's actually really weird when people are like, "Will you sign this?" And I'm like, "I guess." I mean, the name's right there on the cover. I'm gonna write it in there again. It's cool.
There we go. Now it's in Sharpie.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's such like the writing part is super inward, but like the author is like hyper forward facing. And I mean, I'm an extrovert, so it works out. But a lot of my friends do not do so well with this part because it's a lot. There are a lot of people, and it's such a different landscape than it was, 20 years ago when you could be the recluse. Like if you wanted to write and not ever see anybody, you could do that. But now it's just like not a thing. Like social media makes it impossible.
Like J.D. Salinger, who like people never saw.
Yeah, he wouldn't do well today. Like it's just people want to see you, they want to know you. Like that's just kind of how. Yeah, right.
Connection with you. I noticed that's one of the things you're really good at too. Is like on Instagram. And stuff.
I'm just really vain.
You're good at responding to the people that reach out to you, and I've seen a lot of these because you go to speak to a lot of high schools. And stuff. I see a lot of these high schools that are like, "Oh my gosh, she wrote me back! Everyone, look at this!"
It's so weird, bro. Like I can't tell you how bizarre that is. I'm like, you're really excited, and I don't understand why, but you said something nice, so I'm gonna say thank you. And they freak out. No, I respond to people under 18. Is what I will say.
Gotcha.
Because I get some really weird stuff. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm not respond. Block. Push that block button. But yeah, the kids are great.
And it's a part of kind of what comes with the modern day author now. Like you're almost expected to have some kind of social media interaction.
Absolutely. I mean, unless you've been like established for 40 years or something, like you could be Stephen King, you could be J.K. Rowling, and not have to ever talk to anyone. Right. But it's completely different if you are stepping into the landscape now. Yeah. Like it's different.
Is that something that your publisher and your your agent push out there on you, or is it just something that's there that you have to do?
Oh, no, they push you. Like when I first signed with my agent, I signed with my agent in 2000, at the end of 2014. And she like made me start a Twitter account because I did not I was like, I don't want to be on Twitter. Twitter is gross. Like, it's so gross. I don't like Twitter at all. But it has been an awesome place of like forming these connections, and you find there are people that are looking for people like you. Like most of the connections I've made with teachers have been, unfortunately, on Twitter. Like, what are you going to do? But I actually really love Instagram. Instagram is great. I don't know how to do Snapchat though, and luckily they haven't tried to push me into that one because I would be so out of my depth.
Yeah, and then so jumping back with the business and with your Instagram, I see your boys are on there all the time.
Oh, my babies.
When you get a chance to be with the family, how is that? How have you been balancing that out? Like, is that tough? Is your husband like, hey, why you leave me again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't balance it well. And I think that anybody who says that they do is lying. Right. Because it's one of those, this kind of thing, it's impossible to be good at all of it all the time.
Yeah.
So you are absolutely dropping a ball at some point. Like right now, I'm dropping the ball on work. I've been hanging out with my boys all month. And I missed 2 deadlines. Like, I've gotten the stuff in now, but it was just like, oh, okay, I guess I'm just going to go to Jump today and play in the bouncy castle.
And you tell yourself, I'll write some stuff while I'm out.
I'm like, I'll figure it out. And then, like, the manuscript is 3 days late. And I'm like, oh, whoops. But no, it's the support. I have a really, really solid support system. And there's no way I could function without my darling husband, who not only holds me down, but also like lifts me up and like boosts me up.
Yeah.
He is legitimately the reason I am able to do any of this. Like he pulls off the full-time job, single father thing. He's basically been doing it all year. So, but it's interesting though, because it just makes me want to work harder so that he doesn't have to work eventually, you know? And then my dad is my neighbor.
Oh, too cool.
Nice.
Sometimes. It's great. It's great. Like, it's nice that my kid can be like, I'm going to ride my bike to Granddad's house. I'm like, okay, cool. Awesome. My sister's in Norcross. So we're down inside the perimeter, on the west side. And my mom is in Norcross. My mom and sister are in Norcross. So my sister keeps the little one. The bigger one was like in school and everything, so that wasn't a problem. But I mean, I treat writing like a job, like it's like a full-time job.
Yeah.
Where I write, like I think I get to Starbucks at 9 in the morning, 8:45, 9, and I write until, typically I was writing until like 2:45. So, you know.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah, I've got a Panera over by me. That's my spot.
You do what you gotta do.
jam.
Yeah. My Starbucks, they like know me by name, and a lot of the time I don't pay for my drink.
Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder.
Oh, you're here.
Yeah. I've been getting a few free coffees and bagels here and there. I'm like, they must realize it's me again.
Recognizing me now. Yeah. Some of the perks of the job.
But let's give some other people a chance to ask some questions here.
I am an open book, unintended.
I got plenty over here. One of our, actually, we were talking about this earlier. In case you haven't figured out, we hang out 24/7.
And
virtually assistants.
Yes,
but like,
that's exactly right.
Soul sisters.
That's right. And one of the things we were talking about was there's usually a fear that our work will either not be good enough or it'll be too good and people start to criticize it. Like, well, how did you get over, or did you even have, the fear of putting your work out into the public?
Let's talk about Jesus for a second. Because, for real. There's this book I read years ago by Bob Sorge. Dealing with the Rejection and Praise of Man is the name of this book. And basically the premise of this book is that Jesus was neither moved by man's praise nor like wounded by man's rejection.
Very true.
And like it's an attitude that I have tried really hard to adopt.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like I'm the one that has to do the work. And I think once you figure out your reason, like what is your reason for doing your work, everything else just kind of fades. And my reason is my kids, their private school tuition. That's a large part of it. But also just knowing that the work that I create is serving a demographic of kids who typically don't get to see themselves in books. So they're all I care about. Anybody who has criticism, can kick rocks. Like, I just, like, please, by all means, criticize away. It's none of my business. Like, the way people feel about my work, I feel is none of my business. Sure. I'm just supposed to do the work. So for any writers out there who are afraid of how people will respond, honestly, that's not the point. Yeah. You know, like, you're the only person who can tell the stories that are inside of you. So tell them. Otherwise, they don't get told.
Very true.
I think for me, the fear was more, not so much, I don't give two cruds what people think about it. It's more like all the stuff about it. Like you were talking about, like, doing all the interviews or going here or going there, or having to, like, have somebody, like, rope me around, you know, and, like, just the fear around the unknown of that. That's what, like, freaks me out. It's like when I try to start something new, I just, like, get overwhelmed with the unknown of it. So, like, did you ever face that where you were just like, I love writing, I love this subject, I love this thing, but, like,
what about their demands?
The business side of it, the demands, all that stuff, that's what I'm just like,
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, for one, I love the unknown. Like, I find it, like, exhilarating, like, not knowing things. I love not knowing things because it means there's something to learn. Right. But also just, like, I guess I try, like, for me, it was always about what was going on the page. So I didn't think about anything else besides, so I will typically draft a novel in 6 to 8 weeks. And that's just writing every day, 2,000 to 3,000 words a day, head down, nose in the book. And then when I come up for air is when I start thinking about other things. So until I have words on a page that form some kind of something, like, nothing else really even comes to mind. And I think that's important. I think it's important to not avert your eyes. There's this guy, Robert Olin Butler. I read this book he wrote, From Where You Dream is the name of the book, on narrative craft. And he talks about, like, not averting your eyes. So basically keeping your eyes on the work and not letting yourself be pulled out of the story until you've gotten a draft done. And, like, it's a philosophy that has helped me just stay focused until I have a story drafted. And I say drafted and not complete because nothing is ever complete. Like, you just walk away from it, you know? Like, we actually made some changes. Dear Martin came out in October of last year. We made some changes a couple months ago. Like, it's just like, you can make changes for the rest of your life. And there will be printings that have very different things. And that's actually a really good book, From Where You Dream.
We get that a lot in art. I'm a painter, and there's just a point where you can either keep working at the painting and it's going to get worse, probably, or just leave it there, and being able to discern where to stop is key.
My second question is, there has to be, obviously there's a massive cultural difference between both being a African American female versus an African American male. And I was wondering why the character that you have written is from the male perspective, which must be so different for you, putting yourself into that place.
I mean, you know, Dear Martin, which is a book about a 17-year-old African-American male, like you just said, who has a really traumatic experience with racial profiling and police brutality. And in response, he decides to start this journal of letters to the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as he, you know, progresses through the world, becoming more and more aware of the racism around him, and basically trying to see if Dr. King's teachings hold up in the 21st century. And I wrote the book for my sons. So I think because I was writing it for my sons,
very cool, it
was imperative for me to try and slip into the mind and the body of a teenage boy. Because, you know, I wanted to create something that I could eventually hand to them and be like, listen, the world is kind of trash when it comes to people who look like you. But, like, read this, because I wrote it for you. Yes.
Nice.
Mommy wrote it. My sons love, like, we'll go in Barnes & Noble, and my son loves going and, like, finding the book. It's such a good feeling. He's like, Mommy, it's your book. I'm like, yeah, it is. But, yeah, no, so I felt like I had to write it from a boy's perspective. And also, the catalyst for the book was a series of like true events all involving boys. So I wanted to examine like, wait, why is this a thing? You know, like why do people see black boys and get scared? Why are police officers so quick to suspect boys who look a certain way? What are the mechanisms behind that? What are the things kind of in the foundations of our society that keep that going, and where did that come from? So that's why I decided to write a boy. And what's funny though is I actually have an easier time writing boys than girls.
Really?
And I think that has a lot to do with like internalized misogyny, for one, and just we live in a very male-centric society. I don't think anybody can deny that.
Sure.
And so, you know, it's easy to write what you see. And I've had to get better at writing girls.
Yeah.
Which is good. You know, it's always good to expand and get better at things. But yeah, I still, to this day, writing boys is easier.
It's an easier voice for yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, no shade, but like teenage boys just have a lot less going on up there. Pretty much.
Straightforward.
Like there's a sock on the doorknob. Like you know what that means. Yeah, you know? Like it's pretty simple.
So yeah, that brings me right to when you're writing, and these characters, and I read Dear Martin and enjoyed it. Great writing. Your characters, when you get into them, do they get into you? Do you get involved emotionally with your characters to the point that it affects your relationships maybe, or how you stand off from people day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly think that if that isn't the case, your characters probably aren't fleshed out enough. Because if you think about it, right, if it's not affecting me as the writer, it's probably not going to affect the reader.
Sure.
So I feel that my writing, as I'm writing, the effect that I'm feeling should be what you feel when you read it. And like we definitely, like there are things about Justice that I've kind of pulled from my own life, and that he has some characteristics that are very much me. But I'm a huge believer in method writing, just like I am in method acting. You know, you imagine yourself as the person, and write from how you think things would be if you were literally them. And there's that quote, there's a fine line between genius and insanity. Like,
It's so true. Like, oh, how did you think up this story? I'm like, I just watched it.
Writing this book was like the worst 8 weeks of my life. I had 8 weeks to write it because it sold on proposal.
Oh wow.
And so we submitted another book. There was a completely different book that we submitted to the publisher, and the woman who ended up buying it, she liked my writing. She liked the voice of the character in that other book, but she wanted me to tell a different story. And the idea for Dear Martin had been like kicking around, but I hadn't done anything with it. So I get this call from my agent who's like, yeah, so that other idea, do you have anything written down? And I was like, not really. And she's like, okay, well, you have 12 hours.
Wow.
And she's like, yeah, I need a proposal. And so I had 12 hours to pull together a proposal, and she liked it. Yeah. And she was really into it. But then that means I had a very short period of time to draft it. And it was terrible. Doing the research and writing at the same time, and there were so many things that I just didn't want to face. You know, like you spend, I feel like any person with a marginalized background, like any across the spectrum of marginalization, whether it's race, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's, you know, disability, there's so many different ways to be marginalized, but we all have things that we just don't want to look at because like they make you feel helpless. You know, it's like I don't want to look at what people were going through during the civil rights movement because it makes me uncomfortable because I can't do anything about it, you know? Yeah. But it took me realizing that I was doing something about it in writing this book. It's like, okay, I am using my agency in a way that has the potential to like affect change in the world. So the 8 weeks of writing were trash. I don't think I showered very often. Like it was, I didn't eat. I'm sure a teenage boy would have eaten everything in sight, but like I just, it was rough. It was rough. It was worth it though.
Yeah, impressive.
It wound up being worth it.
So you did that on proposal. Now Stephen and I have been batting this back and forth because I'm out here hunting for agents, and at every turn, what I see is if you're writing fiction give us a complete manuscript. Don't even talk to us until you got a complete manuscript. And of course, in your case, it was a little different because you did have a complete manuscript. And so they went from that to, hey, give us a proposal for something different. And so I can see that but had your first manuscript been published yet, or I wasn't clear on that, or was it just being read by?
Yeah, so it went out and to like a bunch of, I think we wound up with like 20 rejections or so on it. But I think that was just like Providence being like, this is not the book you're supposed to start with.
Right.
No, is that the book that you have coming out this fall?
No, so the original book, I haven't even sold it yet.
Oh,
I have no doubt that I will. It'll probably be 2021.
But
right.
Revisions.
Yeah, so exactly. And it's even less the revisions and more like once you become kind of a part of the publishing machine, depending on how deeply you get plugged in at your particular publishing house, they kind of put you on a schedule and this is what we want from you next.
Yeah.
This is the amount of money we're willing to pay you to do what we want. And then you like, okay, fine. But yeah, so what's interesting though, so I sold my first 2 novels on proposal because she offered me a 2-book deal based on that one proposal. And I pitched a second book. I pitched a sentence, and she bought both books. But I'm stepping into middle grade, right? I just sold 2 middle grade novels. And middle grade is like from 6. It's basically aimed at 6th to 8th graders. But she would not take a proposal. Like I had to write an entire middle grade novel before my editor would even look at it.
Gotcha.
Wow.
She wanted to see you could do that language.
Because she wanted to see if I could do it.
Okay,
right. So I mean, it's like the idea of selling on proposal sounds really cool, and it also sucks because like the thing about selling on proposal is that then you have the editor's vision. The editor has a vision for what they think the final product is going to look like, and once they pay you money for it, you have to match their vision, and or you give them their money back.
That is
selling on spec or writing on spec is a lot easier on you as a writer.
Yeah, exactly. It's better for you as the writer to have an entire thing with a beginning, middle, and end. Themes are all there. It's better, in my opinion, until you get a little further along and have a bit more freedom. It's better to sell that because then your editor can't go and be like, okay, now I want you to change the whole story. Yeah. Like the first draft, this is not common knowledge, but the first draft of Dear Martin was double the length. What's in the cover right now is 39,000 words. It's one kid's point of view. And it's linear. The original draft was 79,000 words.
Oh, wow.
It had 8 points of view, and it was not linear. Like, it bounced around in time. And so I basically had to rewrite the book because my editor was like, this isn't what I bought.
There was a part in there where I was reading, and I was like, this feels like she had to truncate something.
Yeah.
I got that distinct feeling that you said, I'm just going to deal with this.
We are just going to jump to the next thing. Yeah, and I mean, and it's a thing,
that's a reality of the publishing industry.
That sounds so intense.
Another reality, your agent you're with now isn't your original.
No, she wasn't. So my original agent, Dear Martin was the 3rd novel I ever wrote, and my first novel I wrote was actually really bad. It did land me an agent, but it was an agent who had never sold. She'd never really worked in the young adult genre. So she thought it was great because it was very much in line with like the big titles of that particular time. But this is the thing, right? When it comes to publishing, the things that are big now sold 2 years ago. So they're not. Publishers aren't buying that same thing now.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
They're looking for the thing that's going to be huge 2 years from now. And my first agent didn't really, she'd never done YA, so she didn't really have like a handle on that. So she sends out this very, very bad book. And we got a number of really interesting rejection. She pulled the submission, like from everybody who hadn't responded. She was like, "Never mind.
Nothing to see here."
Don't just pretend this doesn't exist.
This link is no longer valid.
So she's still an agent.
She is. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
She learned to move for quick
She's a
then.
huge deal agent.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but in the adult world.
Okay.
Yeah, she's the agent for one of the top selling adult authors literally in the world.
Oh wow! So you thought you were like, man, this is a knockout.
I was like, I got this, right? And then no. So, but she wound up firing me because she was like, I frankly am out of my wheelhouse with this YA thing. I really think you should find a new agent. And it ended up being for the best, you know? And it also ended up being good, like, for my ego, because I feel like you have to reach a level of, like, your skin has to get to a certain level of thickness. Yeah, because people do not hold back. Like, I remember some of the rejections I got, both on that terrible first novel and on the second novel, which is the one that my editor decided I should write a proposal. You know, she used that to decide I should write a proposal. Like, some of the stuff I got back on that, too, I was just like, whew, okay.
What was so terrible about it? I mean, was it the writing? Was it the story? Was it all of the above?
Yeah, I mean, my first, it was just full of tropes. And it was like, I could write a book of cliches based on the cliches in that book.
Okay. Yeah.
And it meandered a lot. And I mean, it was one of those, like, everything they tell you not to do, I think I did.
Yeah.
So one of those things that would hurt your reputation if you published it online.
Oh, man. No, you know what? I probably will publish it online just so people can see, hey, look, it gets better.
That's very true. After you're successful, you can.
Yeah. But it, like, opened with a dream sequence.
Oh,
like,
nice.
Like, all
very
of the,
nice.
oh, man, it was so good. There was a prophecy. It was a hardcore chosen one story. Yeah. You had a forbidden romance. Name the trope. I get it.
It was there.
It was in that book.
So it sounds like everybody's first novel.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Catch-all, yeah.
Pretty much. Like the capital F, capital N first novel is a thing that we talk about in publishing. Like, everybody has their first novel, and it's collecting dust on a shelf somewhere.
Right.
Will never see the light of day.
I've got a couple of those.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I do have friends who sold the first thing they ever wrote. I mean, they're fewer and further between than the ones who sold like the fifth or sixth thing.
Right.
But there's no. The beauty of publishing is there's no one success story. You know.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said about writing for your boys, though.
Yeah.
Because, like, I have a son, I'm a single mom, so, like, the mother-son relationship is, like, close to my heart, right?
Oh, I get that.
And because he's getting older, I was like, I'm struggling with these feelings of, like, kind of, like, grief.
Yeah.
Letting go. I mean, he's not going anywhere, but it's like things are changing. He's getting on. So I've written 2 stories about that involve a mother's grief, and it's like helped me process what I'm going through.
Which is what I think stories should do, right? Like, what else is the point?
Well, I'm converting a screenplay that I wrote 6 years ago into a novel right now.
Oh.
And what's hard about that is the screenplay, when you write it, you're thinking, these people have all these deep emotional issues, blah, 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 and you want to dig into it, and you don't have time to do that.
Nope.
You don't have any space to do that, or any grace. And now I'm going back, and I'm using that. Instead of using my original feelings that I put into writing these characters, I'm using the screenplay as a basis to write a novel. Mm-hmm. And after a week of doing that, I was just fighting myself. I was like, why am I stuck on this? And I realized that I was writing character light.
Yeah.
I was not going into the deep stuff, the emotional stuff.
You were thinking about the actors taking over those parts.
And now I've turned it back around, and I'm writing, back to the 2,000 to 3,000 words a day, and back to that meat, that heart, emotional stuff. And that's why I asked the question about does your work get to you? Does it become you? Do your characters indwell you? Because my wife is just like, you've been really emotional, really touchy the last couple of weeks.
And literally, this is why I try to knock out a project quickly, because it does.
Yeah.
And I need to get out of the story as quickly as possible, but I also need to finish it. So hit it, knock it out, and then walk away from it for a while.
Do you feel like, I heard that you write at Starbucks, which is one of my favorite places to write, but do you feel like writing at home is just not even an option because there's so many distractions, or why would you prefer to kind of leave the house and go somewhere?
I mean, there's a lot of things here. The main one is that I like the noise of Starbucks.
The background noise.
And it's like there's always so much life happening at Starbucks that it energizes me. I tell my kids, so like I'll go into schools and I'll tell kids, I'll be like, listen, if you want to be a good writer, you got to know how to eavesdrop. And it's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 100%. I don't know how to listen to other people's conversations without them knowing you're listening. And Starbucks is a place where I've gotten really dang good at that.
We could set you up with a good microphone rig too.
I mean, listen, like I'll put my headphones on, but I won't play anything.
Right.
So people think I'm writing, but really I'm listening to this girl talk about catching her boyfriend cheating.
Lots of writers say like that, you know, I mean, you have to collect those little snippets. And Shirley Jackson used to keep, I mean, she wrote on everything. When they like went through her stuff, I mean, she had napkins, papers, wrappers, candy wrappers. I mean, she wrote on everything.
And speaking of snippets, this episode has just been a snippet of our interview with Nick Stone. Check us out on episode 13, where we get to hear Bill's portion of the story and get to have some more dialogue with Nick Stone.
Oh boy.
So until then, raise a glass to inspiration.
Mine's plastic.
I know, it's a little heavy there.